Right now we're finishing the plasterboard I replaced on the walls. If you want to see that video, I'll leave a link in the description. So I've just mixed up some cornice cement and I've added some plaster accelerant to the mix so I can attempt to do all the base coating and hang the cornice with this 1 gauge of compound. This will save drying time and also not needing to mix up again. This will save a lot more time in the long run. You can see I'm pushing in the compound in there, filling any gaps before I lay the tape. I won't be painting this for a couple of days, so it'll have plenty of time to dry out. I'm using Fibafuse for this job. Actually, I use Fibafuse for most of my jobs, if not all, unless I'm using a taping machine or something like that. So generally, you do your butt joints first and you let them dry out, but when you have such a small job, you have to do everything at once, and sometimes you can disturb already finished areas. I always tape in with my 6-inch blades. Although my 6-inch blades currently, they're both damaged. I've been chipping cornice with them and I've put chips in the blades, which I probably shouldn't do. I do like to use the 6-inch to bed the tape, then I like to glaze over it and use a bigger blade afterwards, which leaves it nice and flat. So with the accelerant in this mix, I know I have around 5 to 10 minutes of working time with this lot and 40 minutes left on the material still in the bucket, which hopefully will give me enough time to tape in right now, second coat all the butt joints, stick the new cornice up, which I already have ready cut, and it's ready to go before I even mix up. Normal job like this, you can get away with doing 1 mix, but anything bigger you probably want to let it dry, and you're going to have to do 2 mixes. This is my last butt joint here. You can see I'm pushing all the compound into the gaps. Pick up my Fibafuse. Fibafuse is much more superior than paper tape in my opinion. It doesn't bubble. Especially handy for anyone just starting out. I like to glaze over it afterwards. Then, with the bigger blade, just give it a skim. Leaves it nice and flat. Now I'm just going to be doing the main joint, the recess joint. The edge of the plasterboard has got a recessed edge, so you can fill it and it stays quite flat. So I'm just quickly going to do that. Sometimes you might want to use gloves when you use Fibafuse. It can make your fingers a little bit itchy if you're handling it too much. I've just ran out of Fibafuse, so I've got a spare little roll of paper tape, so I'm just going to finish with that. So I'll make sure that it's covered entirely with mud before I try and bed the tape, or else you will bubble with this, unlike using Fibafuse. Alright, so I'm just loading it up once more, and I use my bigger 12-inch blade to just go over the whole lot, fill any hollow points, and I know I've got 2 more coats over the top, so it doesn't need to be perfect, but I just like to finish that bigger blade. It really flattens everything out. It's ready for the next coat. Just hitting a few screws here and there. Here I've let it dry for about 10 minutes and I've started to scrape and also load up the butt joints for a second time. Now these butt joints will only get 1 more top coat over the top, and I just need it fairly dry for me to hang my cornice above it. Doesn't look very pretty right now. It doesn't need to be pretty. Just loading it up so it's nice and flat. Like I said, we won't be painting it for a couple of days, so it's okay if it's not entirely dry underneath. It just needs to be fairly dry enough. Compound's getting a bit harder to work with, but I know that the next coat is going to be ready much sooner because this compound has already been drying. Okay, now we've got the last butt joint. Alright, now we're doing the cornice. Okay, I've got my trowel and I'm just putting a bead on the edge of the cornice. As you can see, I've already cut this before I've mixed up because you won't have time. I mean, I could have done another mix just for this cornice, but I thought I can do it all in one. Gonna save me down the stretch. You want a continuous bead, you don't want any gaps or anything like that. You want it to be nice and have some airlocks in there. Consistent bead as you can. And you also want to get up and you want to put a bit of mud on the edges, on the joins, on the miter. So up in the corner I put a bit of mud, and you'll see the other end I'll put a bit of mud in a second. This cornice is made out of paper face gypsum, same as the plasterboard as well, and you can see that there is a gap between the ceiling and the wall, which was already there, and this house is 20 years old, so it's not something I invented. And it's not, if you see that in Australia, it's not that the work is dodgy or anything like that, it's just how it works. Two 1200 millimeter sheets stacked up on top of each other, that's what it equals, and cornice goes on top. It's actually very fast, very efficient as well. Alright, so we're just loading up that second piece now. It's a fair bit quicker if you have two people, but I mean, you don't need two people for these kind of jobs, nice and small. I actually do all the painting and the skirting and the architraves as well for this job. So, and I am the one who sands it. So if you ever come back and there's pinholes, sometimes where you top coat onto an area that's already painted, like on the left here, you can get pinholes, which is quite normal. You can see I've just added a bit of mud to the existing cornice, so when we stick the cornice in, it has something behind it and it will stick to the old cornice as well. This cornice cement is very, very strong. Okay, I've put it up and I've accidentally made it a little bit long, which is not the end of the world. What I'll do now is I'm just going to have to cut it back a little bit using my multi-tool. Not a big problem, just so it tucks in there. There we go. That's good. Give it a little push in, make sure it lines up nicely, and that's ready to go. Sometimes you need to put some screws in to hold the cornice while it dries. Next, you want to get a wet sponge. Have a bucket of water with you so you can always wipe your hands, and have a wet sponge and just carefully go over the cornice. Careful not to go over the same place too many times or you'll wear out the paper of the cornice. Getting any hand marks or anything like that, just giving it an all round clean. Starting to look a lot better once you've cleaned that cornice down. When you're doing it, you want to try and avoid any finger marks as well, so that's looking fairly clean. Still have a few joints to top out, that's alright. Alright, next we're back onto the top coating of the butt joint, so give it a scrape down before you start. You don't want to get any contaminants into the top coat and leave scratches. Your butt joints want to be at least 2 blades wide, so at least 24 inches or something like that. You make it as wide as you want, as long as it's flat in the end. So I like to just load up the butt joint, and then after you just start to take the mud back off and glaze over it as fine as you can. Try not to leave any lines, but you know you're going to be sanding out anyway, so that's fine. Always helps if you mix up your top coat as well. Sometimes on these small jobs I don't get a chance to, and I just dig into the bucket and it never gets mixed up. Thankfully this top coat that I'm using, it's called a 4T product from Pro Plaster, and it's a really good product. It's looking pretty good. Okay, I'm onto my third butt joint here. Just coat it up, get it all covered. Just going over the screws there. Look, I know I'm going to be sanding this, so not too bad. Just feather it off, get your edges, and that will sand nicely. Alright, last butt joint, here we go. You can get pinholing and bubbles occurring on the left side here. It's already been painted with like a low sheen paint, so a flat paint, it's not as bad like a ceiling. But when you're going over a wall which has like a sheen level, really the air has nowhere to escape when it's drying, so it bubbles back out. So sometimes you need to sand it and skim it as well. So now we're just doing our recess joint. Just make sure you go over the existing base coats. And like I said before, you are going to disturb some areas that you've already worked on, which is okay. Don't worry too much. As long as it's all filled, then it can be sanded. You don't want to leave any hollow points, that's for sure. So if anything, you want to overfill so you can sand later. Especially we're not going to be painting this for a few days. It's going to have plenty of time to dry. So just load it up, then catch your edges. It's a lot easier if the butt joints are dry and you can just come through and do your recesses. But sometimes you don't always get that chance to. Just trying to make it as neat as I can before I leave it. Do our screws. And now I'm just going to be loading up around where the cornice joints are. Like I said, my 6" is a little bit broken, so it's not covering as good as what I'd hoped. I really need to get a new one and not use it for chipping cornice away. So I've actually had to resort to using a bigger blade on this one. Once it's sanded and undercoated and 2 coats of paint, you really do not notice that joint, and you'll see in the next video of this project that you won't be able to see where we've gone. I'm actually having to play with this a fair bit because I don't normally use this size blade for this kind of job. Alright, now we're joining the new to the old. Normally I just use my 6". It's leaving lines. The main idea is you don't see where you've put the new and the old together. But anyway, that's about it for the video. We're going to come back, we're going to sand it, we're going to paint it, we're going to put the baseboard in, the skirting board as we call it here in Australia. And that's it. It's all about the sanding now and the undercoating. There was pop screws up here before, so we're just going to fix that. But that's it for this video. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video when we're going to be sanding, we're going to be painting this one. I hope you enjoyed the video. That's it. If you haven't seen the fixing video, I'll leave a link in the description. See you next time.